The lobster thermidor came back to the kitchen for the third time. Table 12 says it's cold. My sous chef Marcus called out, irritation bleeding through his professional demeanor. That's the cousin reunion party, right? I glanced through the kitchen's porthole window at table 12, where my extended family was holding court like they owned the place. My cousin Sophia was actually snapping her fingers at one of my servers while her sister Diana recorded everything on her phone, probably for some cruel social media post later. I'll handle it, I said, readying my apron. Send out a fresh one, extra garnish. Make it perfect. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Chef, you don't serve tables anymore. Tonight I do. I'd been watching them for the past hour from the kitchen of Mariposa, my restaurant in downtown Seattle. The Flores family reunion. 23 of my cousins, aunts, and uncles celebrating my Aunt Carmen's 70th birthday at the hottest reservation in the city. They had no idea I owned it. When I'd opened Mariposa 2 years ago, I'd done it quietly. No family fanfare, no grand announcements on Facebook. After 15 years of being the family disappointment, poor Elena, still waiting tables, I'd learned to keep my successes to myself. I picked up the fresh lobster thermidor and headed into the dining room. Look, it's Elena. My cousin Roberto's voice boomed across the restaurant. Still waiting tables at 40. The entire table erupted in laughter. 23 members of my extended family, all dressed in their finest clothes, all looking at me like I was the evening's entertainment. Elena, Aunt Carmen clapped her hands together. What a wonderful surprise. I didn't know you worked here. Just helping out, I said smoothly, setting down the plate in front of Sophia. The regular server mentioned you weren't satisfied with the temperature. It was ice cold, Sophia said, not even looking at me. Honestly, for these prices, you'd think they could serve hot food. My apologies. This one just came from the kitchen. Guys, Diana held up her phone. We need a picture. Elena's serving us at a fancy restaurant. Mom won't believe this. Oh, let her be, Uncle Miguel said, though he was chuckling. Not everyone can marry a doctor like you did, Diana. Or own a chain of dry cleaners like Roberto, Aunt Lucia added. Elena's doing her best with what she has. I stood there, holding the empty tray, while they discussed my failures like I wasn't even present. It was a familiar feeling, being furniture in my own family's narrative. Remember when she said she was going to culinary school? Roberto laughed. Mom said, why learn to cook professionally when you can't even get a husband to cook for? At least she's consistent, Sophia added, examining her lobster with suspicion. 15 years in food service. That's dedication. It's called being stuck, her husband Jeremy corrected. No offense, Elena. All the offense, actually. But I just smiled the same smile I'd perfected over years of customer service. Can I get you anything else? Actually, yes. Roberto waved his hand expansively. Let's order the most expensive items on the menu. Help out with your tips. He winked at the others. Family takes care of family, right? They ordered 3 bottles of our most expensive wine. A 2015 Chateau Margaux at $800 each. The 24-ounce Wagyu ribeye. The tasting menu with wine pairings. Every premium supplement. They were performing their wealth, making sure I knew exactly how far above me they'd risen. This is costing a fortune, Aunt Carmen whispered, though not quietly enough. Don't worry, Mama, Diana said loudly. It's worth it to support Elena. Every little tip helps when you're living paycheck to paycheck. I wrote down their orders, my hand steady despite the familiar burn of humiliation. I'll have the kitchen prepare everything specially for you. You do that, prima, Roberto said, using the Spanish word for cousin like it was a pat on the head. And hey, make sure my steak is actually medium rare this time. I know you're just the waitress, but maybe you can communicate that to the actual chef. I'll make sure of it. I walked back to the kitchen, where my entire staff was waiting. Chef, Marcus said quietly, you know we can refuse service to anyone who. No. I pulled off my server's apron and put on my chef's coat. They want the most expensive meal of their lives? Let's give it to them. For the next hour, I personally prepared every dish for table 12. The Wagyu, dry-aged for 45 days, seared to perfection. The lobster, flown in from Maine that morning, butter-poached until it melted on the tongue. Each course of the tasting menu, a symphony of flavors I'd spent years perfecting. I watched through the porthole as they ate, their mockery gradually fading into appreciative silence. Even Sophia stopped complaining by the third course. This is incredible, I heard Diana say. I had no idea this place was this good. For what we're paying, it better be, Roberto replied, though he was practically licking his plate clean. When the last dessert was served, my signature deconstructed tres leches that had gotten me a James Beard nomination, I knew it was time. I took off my chef's coat and put back on the server's apron. Then I printed out their bill. With wine, food, and service charges, it came to $8,742.63. I carried it out myself. Here's your check, I said, placing the leather folder on the table. I hope everything was to your satisfaction. Roberto didn't even look at it. He just handed over his Black American Express, still laughing at something Jeremy had said about my career trajectory. Actually, I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down at their table, I'd like to discuss the bill with you. The conversation stopped. 23 faces turned to stare at me. Elena, what are you doing? Aunt Carmen asked, confused. You can't sit with the customers. I can when I own the restaurant, I said quietly. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Diana laughed nervously. That's a weird joke. I pulled out my business card. Chef Elena Flores, owner and executive chef Mariposa. Not a joke. I opened this place 2 years ago. That wagyu you just ate, I dry-aged it myself. The lobster thermidor that was too cold, I made it 3 times to make sure it was perfect. Roberto's face had gone pale. You're lying. The 2015 Chateau Margaux you insisted on ordering? I continued. I bought those bottles at auction last year. Cost me $400 each. I marked them up to $800 because people like you equate price with quality. This isn't possible, Sophia whispered. You're a waitress. You've always been a waitress. I was a waitress, I corrected. While I saved money for culinary school. While I worked under Thomas Keller at the French Laundry. While I staged in Copenhagen and Tokyo and Paris. While you were all laughing at family dinners about poor Elena, I was learning from the best chefs in the world. I stood up, smoothing my apron. As the owner, I'm comping your entire meal. All $8,742.63 of it. What? Roberto blinked. Why would you? Because I want you to know that I could afford to throw away what you consider a fortune. Because I want you to remember that the cousin you mocked for 15 years just gave you the best meal of your lives. And because I never want to see any of you in my restaurant again. You can't ban us. Diana sputtered. We're family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't humiliate each other for sport. Family doesn't measure worth by career titles or bank accounts. Family doesn't order expensive meals to help with tips while laughing at someone's life choices. I signaled to the front of house. 2 security guards, discreet but visible, moved into position by the door. Mariposa has a strict policy, I continued. We don't serve people who disrespect our staff. And since you spent an hour disrespecting the owner, I shrugged. You're all permanently banned. This is ridiculous. Uncle Miguel stood up. Carmen is my sister. You can't ban us from celebrating family occasions. I can and I will. I met his eyes steadily. You know what the saddest part is? If any of you had asked, really asked, about my life in the last 15 years, you'd have known. I wasn't hiding. I just stopped sharing with people who only wanted to hear about my failures. Aunt Carmen's eyes filled with tears. Elena, Mija, I didn't know. No, Tia, you didn't want to know. It was easier to pity poor Elena than to celebrate my successes. Well, now you know. I own one of the most successful restaurants in Seattle. I have a James Beard nomination. I was just featured in Food and Wine as one of the top chefs under 50. And I did it all while you were laughing at me for still waiting tables. The security guard stepped forward. Ma'am, we need to ask you to leave. This is insane. Roberto grabbed his receipt. We're not paying for. He stopped, reading the bottom. Paid in full owner comp. The meal is free, I said. But respect? That costs extra. And you can't afford it. One by one, they filed out. Some angry, some embarrassed, some still in shock. Sophia muttered something about a lawsuit. Diana was already on her phone, probably trying to spin the story for social media. Roberto looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Aunt Carmen was the last to leave. She stopped in front of me, her face crumpled with regret. I'm so proud of you, Mija. No, I said gently but firmly. You don't get to be proud now. You had 20 years to be proud. You chose pity instead. She left crying, helped by Uncle Miguel. The restaurant felt different with them gone. Lighter. Cleaner. My staff began to emerge from the kitchen and service stations where they'd been watching. Holy shit, chef, Marcus whistled. That was necessary, I finished. Nobody disrespects my team. Not even family. Your team? Lily, one of my servers, asked. They were disrespecting you. Same thing. I looked around at my staff, my real family, the one I'd chosen and built. This restaurant isn't just mine. It's ours. And anyone who can't respect that doesn't deserve to eat here. The rest of the evening passed smoothly. Our regular guests, the ones who came for the food and the experience rather than to flex their credit cards, filled the space with the kind of energy I'd always wanted for Mariposa. Around 11, as we were preparing for closing, Marcus approached me with his tablet. Chef, you need to see this. It was a Yelp review, posted an hour ago by Diana. 1 star. A lengthy rant about discrimination, terrible service, and being scammed by a bitter relative who couldn't handle seeing family success. I laughed. Really laughed. Leave it up. But chef, look at the responses. Below Diana's review, dozens of replies were already appearing. Regular customers who'd witnessed the scene. Food critics who knew my work. Other restaurant owners expressing support. The review was being buried under an avalanche of 5-star responses. You know what the best revenge is? I asked Marcus. Living well. Nah. I grinned. It's a fully booked restaurant and a 3-month wait list. Which, by the way, just got longer for anyone with the last name Flores. As I locked up Mariposa that night, I thought about the trajectory that had brought me here. All those years of poor Elena comments. All those family dinners where I'd served others while being served mockery in return. They'd been right about one thing. I was still serving at 40. But now I served on my own terms, in my own restaurant, creating experiences that people would remember for a lifetime. And if those people happened to exclude my entire extended family, well, that was their choice. They'd ordered the most expensive meal possible, trying to make me feel small. Instead, they'd gotten a priceless lesson. Never underestimate the waitress. She might just own the place. The next morning, I had 47 missed calls and twice as many texts. Family members who'd heard about the incident. Some apologizing, some demanding explanations, some threatening various forms of retaliation. I deleted them all and blocked the numbers. Then I went to my restaurant, my beautiful, successful restaurant, and started prep for another fully booked evening. Because that's what you do when you're living your dream instead of living down to others' expectations. You keep cooking. You keep serving. You keep succeeding. And you never, ever, let them see you cry into the soup.